Imagine a king so obsessed with having a son that he literally changed the country's religion just to get a divorce. He didn't just break up with his wife, he broke up with God. Meet Henry VIII. You probably know him as the fat guy with 6 wives, or the guy who chopped off heads when he was in a bad mood. But before he became a tyrant, he was actually a super fit, handsome, and charming teenager. He was the Brad Pitt of the 1500s. But here is the crazy part. He wasn't even supposed to be king. He was the spare child. His older brother, Arthur, was the golden boy. Arthur was trained to be king from the day he was born. And Arthur had one main job: to marry a Spanish princess and make England rich. So, Arthur married Catherine of Aragon. She was Spanish royalty, super smart, and very religious. It was the perfect power couple. But then, disaster struck. Just 5 months after the wedding, Arthur got sick. And he died. Just like that, suddenly, young Henry was next in line for the throne. He was only 10 years old. His father, the old king, was in panic mode. He didn't want to lose the alliance with Spain. And he definitely didn't want to give back Catherine's massive dowry money. So, the old king had a brilliant idea. Hey, Henry, why don't you marry your brother's widow? Yeah, marry his sister-in-law. Now, this was technically against the rules of the Bible. Leviticus says you should not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. Basically, don't marry your brother's ex. If you do, you will be childless. Remember that part. It is important. But the Pope in Rome said, "It's okay. I'll give you a special pass." So, at age 17, Henry became King Henry VIII. And he married Catherine. She was 23, and he was a teenager. At first, they were actually happy. Henry was young, athletic, and loved to party. Catherine was a great queen. She even acted as an ambassador and controlled the army when Henry was away fighting wars. They were the it couple of Europe. But there was one tiny, massive problem. They needed a son, a male heir. In those days, people thought women couldn't rule a country. If Henry didn't have a son, the Tudor family line would end. And England would fall into civil war again. So, they tried, and tried. Catherine got pregnant 6 times. But the tragedy was heartbreaking. Stillborn, dead after a few days. Miscarriage, only one child survived, a girl named Mary. Henry loved Mary, but she wasn't a boy. Henry started to freak out. He was getting older. Catherine was getting older. She was past childbearing age. And Henry started to think, wait a minute. Is this my fault, or is God punishing me? Remember that Bible verse about marrying your brother's wife? Henry convinced himself that his marriage was cursed. He thought, I shouldn't have married my brother's wife. The Pope was wrong. God is angry at me. That is why I have no sons. It wasn't biology. It was divine punishment. Conveniently, right around this time, Henry met someone else. Her name was Anne Boleyn. Now, Anne wasn't your typical beauty. She was smart, feisty, and played hard to get. Usually, kings had mistresses. Henry had plenty. He even dated Anne's sister, Mary Boleyn, before this. But Anne was different. She said, no. She told the king, I won't sleep with you unless you put a ring on it. I want to be queen, not a mistress. Henry went crazy for her. He wrote her love letters. He gave her expensive gifts. He was obsessed. He decided he had to get rid of Catherine. He needed a divorce. But back then, divorce didn't exist. You needed an annulment. Basically, the Pope had to say, oops, the marriage never actually counted. Henry sent his best lawyers to Rome. He said, hey Pope, remember that special pass? The one you gave me to marry my brother's wife? It was a mistake. The Bible says it's bad. So please cancel my marriage. Henry thought it would be easy. He was the King of England, after all. But there was a problem. The Pope was currently being held hostage by the Emperor of Europe. And guess who the Emperor was? Charles V, Catherine of Aragon's nephew. So, imagine the situation. The Pope couldn't say, yes, to Henry. because Catherine's nephew had a sword to his throat. So the Pope stalled. He delayed. He sent inspectors to England to investigate the marriage. This went on for years. 6 years of waiting. Henry was furious. He was losing his hair, gaining weight, and losing his patience. Anne Boleyn was still saying, "No ring, no king." Finally, Henry snapped. He looked at his advisors and said, "Why do we need the Pope anyway? Who says the Pope is the boss of me? I am the king appointed by God. I should be the boss of the church in England." This was a revolutionary idea. It was dangerous. People were burned at the stake for saying things like this. But Henry didn't care. He was in love, and he wanted a son. So, he fired the Pope. Literally, he passed a law called the Act of Supremacy. He declared that the king is the supreme head of the Church of England. He kicked the Catholic Church out of the country. He took all the church's money and land. And most importantly, he granted his own divorce. He sent Catherine away to a cold, lonely castle. He forbade her from seeing her daughter, Mary. It was brutal. Catherine died a few years later, calling herself the true queen until her last breath. But Henry didn't mourn. He finally married Anne Boleyn. He was so happy. He was sure that God was finally on his side. He was sure Anne would give him a son. She got pregnant immediately. The whole country waited. Henry prepared a massive celebration for the birth of a prince. And then, the baby was born. It was a girl. Her name was Elizabeth. Henry was devastated. He destroyed the religion of his country. He humiliated his loyal wife. He made enemies with all of Europe. All for a son. And he got another daughter. You can imagine what happened next. If Henry could divorce his first wife, what would stop him from getting rid of the second one? But that is a story for the next episode. Because Anne Boleyn's story doesn't end with a divorce. It ends with a sword. Henry VIII was just getting started on his path to becoming a monster. History is full of crazy stories like this. We think royalty is all fancy dinners and crowns. But the truth is, it's mostly dysfunctional families with too much power. What do you think? Was Henry cursed? Or was he just a selfish jerk? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your take on this royal drama. If you enjoyed this wild ride through history, please hit that like button. It helps the YouTube algorithm show this video to more history fans. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. We have 5 more wives to talk about, and trust me, it gets crazier. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.